So I'm with the team from Oregon Institute of Technology, sometimes called Oregon Tech, and they are the team that participated in the 2018 NSPS student competition. So I'm going to begin by asking them to introduce themselves.
My name is Saul Preciado.
John Hennon.
Katie Singleton.
Mosier Locke.
Marcus Helm.
Riley Edwards.
And you presented, talked about what you did. Everybody had to kind of do the same thing, but everybody was working on a different tract of land. So can you tell me a little bit about what you might have done thinking about this project, not knowing all the details, because you guys had a few surprises along the way. You performed the survey itself, the field work on a Sunday, but only on Saturday did you find out certain details such as no theodolite, no transit, no total station, and so forth. So how did you think about this and to prepare for this event?
We were just trying to prepare for anything. We were warned that there could be surprises, so we just came in with an open mind.
So did you do any practice surveying?
Yeah, we practice about once every week. We could for about 8 weekends, I would say. So it worked out in our favor, I believe.
So what kind of practice surveying were you doing? What kind of surveying instrumentation and procedures?
Well, we were thinking if we were handed a traverse, we were going to be able to use the azimuth ring on the level. Of course, when we got here, we found out that wasn't the case, so we did have to think on our feet a little bit. That was one thing that we practiced. Otherwise, we were practicing pulling tape and coordinating. I think the main thing we practiced was just understanding the workflow and how we worked well together so that whatever came up, we would be prepared.
So we've covered the distance measurement part. How did you prepare for the angle measurement part?
So for the angular measurements, again, we focused a lot on the azimuth ring, using the level. Finding out we couldn't use that, we kind of said, well, let's try and just put more significance towards the distances. We can use that along with the right triangles, the 3, 4, 5, to really just kind of use that to get what we're looking for.
Did you anticipate at all that you might be using a compass? Has anybody on this team used a compass before?
Yeah, Riley, he's done a lot of work with compasses, in his internships over the summer. We actually did do a lot of practice compasses because, like we said, we were just trying to get ready for anything and everything, and not knowing what was going to happen, we just kind of made sure whatever they threw at us, we could hit it.
And so, how did you get this experience, and what kind of compass were you using, Riley?
I was just using a normal compass that had a declination. You could set it on the back, and I got my experience from doing cadastral work for Washington State Department of Natural Resources, running their timber lines for their timber sales. And basically what you do is you find a corner and then you take your compass out, find the bearing that the line is running along, and set it to it and start brushing. So that's where I learned it.
So once you got to the site and you got familiar with what the general location was and what you were having to deal with, what was the very first thing you did in terms of measurements?
Our first step was really to get an overall idea of the lay of the land. We tweaked, we were thinking ahead towards our topographic grid, and we ended up kind of changing the orientation of our cross sections to better match the topography. But beyond that, the first actual step was getting our basis of bearing from that benchmark in the middle.
Okay, so since Riley is apparently the compass expert, I'm going to ask him, so what was specifically done with the compass to get that survey started?
When we found out the declination when we first got here, the first thing we did was go back up to the rooms when we were figuring out how we're going to proceed. We set the declination, so by the time we were out in the field, it was already set, so all you had to do was set it on the ring for the bearing and just hold it up and go where it tells you.
So tell me, Mosier, where you went to on the site to actually perform that first compass observation. It may not have been you, but where was whoever did it? Where did they locate themselves?
Yeah, so where we first went is we came out here, and this was our center point. We called it just benchmark number 11, and we went out there, and that's where we kind of set up base camp. And it's from there that we took our compass and we read our bearings and we angled ourselves up. So we traveled up along, looked back on the compass for our back bearing, came back, and we went back and forth, kind of checking what we'd measured so we could get some redundancy.
So how far out did you go from that center point?
I think from there I think we went for about 125 feet, that just so we could definitely get past where the property line was.
And you said something about going back and forth. Why was that important?
You just want as much redundancy as possible when you're getting these measurements, especially an angular measurement when you can only use a compass. You're not going to get a very exact measurement to begin with. It's not going to be that accurate. So just the more times you take it, the better you're going to feel about the accuracy.
So once you had that 125-foot line set up with your compass, what did you do next?
To avoid any angles coming back, we sighted the entire length. From up here all the way past this to one straight line rather than creating any kind of angle.
Okay, so you took that initial line that went from the center point to some point in the northeast along that bearing of your east or west line, and then after you established it, you extended it, how did you try to make sure that it was still the true line as you extended it south? Did you simply run a compass bearing?
We held that line as our main line, as our basis of bearing, and we could check it periodically using the level as a line of sight to sight through one of our triangle points, which would be the 40, and sight through the middle, make sure it all lines up. And then that's how we sighted all the way down south to get our midpoint set down there.
Yeah, we actually we set up the level on this north line midpoint, and was able to line up and get that level set. So I'm looking dead center on the plumb bob string, and then we could just carry that line forwards to the south.
So that's very interesting because even though you had limited equipment, you realized that you did have an alignment tool with your level and you used it to actually align some of your lines better than if you're simply using the range pole or prism pole method. So what was the next step after you had that line established?
So once we had that main line established, we took that and we set up and pulled a distance of 40 feet back towards the center point from the midpoint on the north line. That way we could set up a 3, 4, 5 right angle triangle so we could establish where the north line is. And then from there we could pull tape from the midpoint along the line that we'd established perpendicular to our bases of bearing to determine the location of the property corners.
So if I understand this correctly, once you had that line established, you measured out a certain distance, and then you did a 3, 4, 5 triangle either to the east or to the west, or maybe both, to get that north line established, and you knew what length it needed to be.
Yes, that's correct. We were initially hoping to be able to set the entire north line with just one of those triangles, but that was one of the challenges we encountered. Is we chose to go east first, but the west corner was actually a little higher, so we ended up having to. We couldn't get a line of sight directly from the northeast to the northwest, so we had to repeat that.
Yeah, those level telescopes don't bend very well, do they? So tell me about the topographic survey. Did you set up a grid, or did you do this some other way?
So what we did was we actually started out by making a 25-foot by 25-foot grid, but just to get better readings of our features within our parcel, we actually ended up just doing some kind of cross-sectional grid, so where every time we reached a different feature, we could just plot it within the topographic survey itself.
You can see somewhat on the map here, we ended up setting roughly 25 feet points along the north and the south lines, and from there we could run cross sections from north-south, and so we didn't necessarily get every 25 feet in this direction, but we were able to pick up the important features and collect them out.
So that's interesting. So you basically had about 8 or 10 cross sections, and then you walked along them looking for kind of critical points in the terrain and got elevations there. And so how did you get your distance from the endpoint?
We had it set up, we had a tape pulled from the north to south line, and we used stationing, so 0 plus 25, 0 plus 50, and whatever that distance was that read on the tape, that's what we held for a distance.
So in terms of the entire project, fieldwork, preparation, presentation, map creation, what would you say was the most challenging part for you to get done?
It was actually dealing with the wind. Getting everything else done was, we had already prepared for it. We were ready for it. So it was just dealing with that just during the day.
I would say it'd be the determining the geometry of the boundary shape, because we tried at first to go along and hold our north and south lines parallel to each other, and we're trying to create a trapezoid figure, because we wanted to hold distances, but we wanted to hold the north and south parallels. And then we figured we had to abandon that idea, and we went with the least squares approach instead.
Yeah, we determined that technically the trapezoid was mathematically impossible based on our measurements, and trust me, we tried quite a bit to make that work. But yeah, we ended up going with the least squares. I think for me, the most difficult part was just running out of time. I know all of us can be perfectionists and we want to make that map perfect, but sometimes the deadline happens and you just have to do your best.
Yeah, I agree with Katie. I think kind of along the lines of drafting and kind of time towards the end, like we really want it to look nice. We want things to go well and everything to be on there that we want on there and need on there. So when we look up and have 15 minutes left and we're hearing things like, oh, we still need to put a legend on there, we still need to get things where we want, it's like, okay, now we need to really crunch time and get things going.
Yeah, I have to agree with the last two previous statements. For watching us work around that table on the office day, it got very difficult there towards the end to make sure everything was on there and make sure everything looked as good as we could make it, well, as good as we were going to be, or we'd accept. You know, like Katie said, bunch of perfectionists right here, so trying to get the deadline was pretty hard.
I'd say during the field work, redundancy, having enough redundancy. We thought we had enough, but when we got back, we figured out that we could have had more, so just knowing what's enough and what's not enough.
Well, thank you for spending your time with me. I know you're kind of skipping out on a little bit of your lunch hour, and thanks for sharing, and good luck with the competition.
Thank you.